So let's talk a little bit about how we do project ourselves. Shelly, let's talk about the brand. And I gave highlights of your backgrounds, but how did you develop your own brand? You built brands for your clients, American Express and what have you. How does one build their personal brand, right?
Okay, so I didn't say this to you when we talked about it on the phone, but I hate the whole concept of personal brand, is the truth.
Okay,
because it sounds somehow packaged and inauthentic.
Right.
As if you sort of set out and go, this is the person I want to project, as opposed to this is who I am.
How do we project who we are?
Right.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I think, sounds simplistic and crazy, is just you sort of have to be yourself. You have to sort of know that people want you for who you are and what you are. Now, you can step back and say, what is it that I bring to any board, to any organization? I think that's a very important, thing to think about. Mm-hmm. And it goes beyond, I know investment banking, I know the buy side and the sell side, I know real estate. It's sort of, what do you actually bring to a board beyond that? Because the start of the conversation is what you do for a living and what your experience is. And I'll give you an example that I just went through on a nominating committee for a new director. And we were looking for someone with technology, which is very of the moment, sort of a West Coast orientation, and someone who knew the digital world well. And so that was relatively easy to find. The reason we chose the person we chose was when I spoke to the CEO, whose board, she had served on one board before, whose board she served on. He kept talking about how calm and cool she was in the most difficult situations. And they went through an activist and a hostile takeover, and he just kept saying that about her. Now, she's really smart, she's really capable, she's really experienced, but I could tell to this man and on this board, what she did was she provided stability, calm, and what I was thinking about is I never heard her say that. I don't know that she knows that is sort of how she is perceived. And so I think it's important to think about, what would people say about you? People who have served with you in any organization, on any board, and then that becomes sort of part of what you offer to another organization. And I just think it's important to to think about that, because you will be asked when you're being considered for a board, what do you think you bring to a board?
Well, it's often the question that I ask people in any job interview for getting boards, but any C-suite too, is how do people describe you? What's the feedback you've gotten? You should know how people see you, and you should have advisors or advisory board where you do get good feedback from people.
And of course, the other thing is they are going to call the people you know. So, you should have some sense of what they're about to say.
Right, exactly. But so positioning yourself and knowing who you are. MaryAnne.
I really dig everything you said, because I can't say that I worked on any personal brand. I was the beneficiary, of a meritocracy, where Bruce Ratner believed it was the best man or woman for a job. He is a real estate titan who has 2 daughters who didn't want to be in the real estate business. Clearly, I was the beneficiary of that reality. And I never had my eye on the corner office. And so when I looked up and I was tapped to be CEO, it happened for all the right reasons. And I was at once thrilled and terrified at that, because I felt like I had the better job, which is to be his wingman. But I also knew that I had to do it as long as I was going to be the real CEO. And so that 5-year journey as CEO primed me to be a better board member, but I was also a better CEO because I was on boards as well. The Matt Calley situation is interesting because it really told me a little bit about how I was perceived, because there was an agitator involved, and it's an old board of white Jewish men that are all really friends of the chairman, and they've been on every list for poor governance and lack of independence for a really long time. And so they were under severe pressure, and I was approached by the activists who were really good guys who I didn't know, and they said your name, kept coming up because you know the business, but you seem to be a truly independent person who knows kind of how to navigate through crises and difficulty. And I thought, I don't really need to be on the wrong side of this board. Like it's my business, and I'm busy, so go away. It turned out that the chairman of the board knew that change was afoot, and I became instantly. There were 4 candidates that were being put forward. One was a Harvard Law School professor. One was the former head of Tiffany's, who knew brands, and the other was a professional board member. And I was the real estate expert. So it turns out, in the strangest of ways, and they slogged it out. It went all the way to a board vote where Glass Lewis and ISS voted for all of the dissident candidates, all 4 of them. But I was the one candidate that both sides agreed was the right candidate. So no matter what was going to happen, Matt Calley agreed to take me on the board. This is all public information. They agreed to take me because they realized that if there was a strategic committee formed to look at where their business should go, what better outcome than to have somebody who knows the business. And so I think it's really about, if you really do add value, and it could be your style. Some boards don't want people who speak up, and some boards want to hear from their board. And I think that it's also about what your package is that you bring to any board at any given time. And my phone has never been ringing more, because now I think all of the companies that don't have diverse boards are under pressure, and real estate's like the last frontier. I mean, it really still is an old boys network. And so I'm now at a place where I'm looking to make sure that I am super, super careful. First of all, I'm an acting CEO. I don't need any more work. But for me, it's about upping my game to say that for the 5 board calls I get, I'm really going to find other women to whom I'm going to refer those board opportunities, and I'm going to hold out for something that's more befitting for what I need, which is next level board service. And so those calls are important to me, and I always speak with the headhunters and the individuals, because there is always a woman out there or a diverse candidate out there that can certainly be considered for those seats.
Pamela.
I've had time to think about my answer. Those are all good stories. So I would say what people would say about me, particularly if they were calling around, would Pam make a good board member? This is not necessarily a compliment for when you're starting out your career. Oh, she works hard and keeps her head down. That's not necessarily what we want to be known for. But what I am known for, I believe, on the boards that I serve on, is that I really prepare. I do the work. Sometimes I do beyond the work, and I show up. Not everybody does the work on boards, which is, I don't know about the boards that you're on, but not everybody does.
And by the way, it's obvious.
It truly is. There are people there who are doing their other work on the down low, but I come prepared. If I don't know something, I ask questions. Sometimes I use the questions as a way to push a point of view or an area of inquiry that I think, well, maybe I don't know it fully, but on the way to making my point, I'll learn a lot along the way. And then particularly on the mutual fund board, there is a fair bit of kind of extra homework one is really required or should do to keep up with the regulatory developments. The job, I joined the board in 2007, and so I've been on the board for quite a number of years, and it's kind of night and day in terms of the amount of work and the amount of kind of regulatory scrutiny that independent board members are receiving. So it's really not for the faint of heart. It's real work. Being on any corporate board is real work, and then there's real liability. So number one, she does her homework, and she comes prepared. She comes to play. So On the play side of coming to play, I'm an introvert, but I work really hard to look like I'm not an introvert. And I really work to develop relationships and find a commonality with everyone I'm working with. I thought of this story while you guys were talking. This happens to be on the Presbyterian board, but David Koch, who we just lost, was on our board. And you know, he would come to board meetings, and obviously very senior stature. I was always sitting somewhere else, and I said, you know, I've been on the board with him for several years. I know he doesn't know me. I'd at least like to say hello and get a conversation going. So I I came early, sat next to him. Coming early is another great way to get to know different people as opposed to just arriving or coming late. So I sat next to him, and he's, I would say, also an introvert. Would you say that, Shelly?
Yes, for sure.
And I said, oh my God,
Very awkward.
what am I going to do? So I said hello, he said hello, and then the conversation stopped. I said, oh my God, what am I going to say next?
Experience here,
So I looked down at his hands, and he had on a brass rat. I don't know if anybody knows what a brass rat is. It is, if you went to MIT, that's the school ring. Well, my sister went to MIT. And I said, oh, I notice you have a brass rat on. He said, well, how did you know? And we got into, the rest of the time before the board meeting, he told me his whole life story and how special it was for him to follow his father, and maybe even a grandfather, to MIT, something he was really proud of. So I would say that story is emblematic of my real, I would say, authentic effort to find commonality, find where there's something more than just we read the same newspaper article that we have in common. And it's kind of a lot of fun.
That's a great story. And you know, in some of the searches I've done, actually, often the CEO wants a woman because men will oftentimes open up and tell more to a woman than they will to another man.
Yeah.
You have all built a reputation. You're known in the market. How did these wonderful women build their reputation further in the market? By social media, being out there speaking, writing? Because I often say it's not always who you know, it's who knows you. Who knows you? So how do you build your reputation? Pamela?
In part, on the corporate finance, financial services side, you know, I just advanced in my career, and at the time there weren't many women, and certainly not even fewer women of color, so it was not hard to be known in New York. I think we've certainly talked about the importance and influence that non-for-profit boards can serve, and they certainly have served me well in that regard. Like Janice, I have, but not to the extent of Janice, I have not written 2 books, but I've done some research on women in leadership. That's on my website. It's available to you if you're interested. One was the Everest Project, Women Leading Change and Innovation, where we interviewed almost 300 senior executives about women leading change. And I'm not here to talk about that report, but just getting that report out there, meeting 300 new executives that I hadn't known. It's like I created something from nothing, and all of a sudden I've got new colleagues, a stronger network. That's not why I did it. I know more about what successful women do when they're leading. I know better how to run my consulting business, but it has had lots of ancillary effects in terms of, broadening my network and building my reputation.
Yeah, and that is the other piece of it. It's your network, too. You broaden it. And I think, Shelly, you said every conversation is an interview, right? Somebody told you that, and I think that's true. Sitting on a plane and you may be interviewing somebody. But it's part of
No
your...
pressure.
Yeah, right. But it's part of your network as you're building it and you're building your reputation. So can you go further with what Pamela just said?
Well, I just, to me, Pam started down this road. It's just getting out there. It's just, sort of saying yes. The way I got on the GE board was, GE has a women's network, and someone just wrote me a letter and said, would you be willing to come and speak to, we have an annual event. And I, being the sort of cheeky person I was, I said, sure, if I could meet Jack Welch, because I never have, and I'd like to. And so they said, well, we could arrange that. And there was this very memorable, there were 600 women from around the world who were in this ballroom in the Rytown Hilton. And they organized it so I spoke at the end of the day, because that's when Jack was coming to do Q&A and have cocktails with the women. So I walk into the outer area of the ballroom, and it was like the scene from Network, from the thing with Holly Hunter, who's the broadcast news, where they're all running around and people are throwing tapes and everybody's yelling and what had happened was Heidi Miller, who was the CFO of JP Morgan at the time, had delivered a speech that morning to the 600 women, basically inciting them to riot. To say, she said to them, it's outrageous that there are no women in the C-suite of this company. You have to demand it, you have to come forward. And so the organizers of this felt a need to get this speech to Jack Welch before he entered that room with the 600 women who were now so worked up that they could hardly, they were vibrating. And so I didn't know any of this. I just showed up and I gave my speech about being authentic and being yourself and being judged by what you contribute and what you do and all that. And Jack gets on the stage and goes, that woman is, represents what we believe at GE. And then 3 weeks later, he asked me to join the GE board.
Wow.
And that was how it happened. Now, I could have easily said, are you kidding? Go make a speech to a group of people I don't know at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Westchester. I was CEO at the time. I had so much to do, but I just said yes. I just got out there. And I think one thing breeds another. You're on a panel and then there are two people in the audience who think, well, she would be interesting on this other panel I'm doing. And, how many years later, I found myself one day, I was on the business board of the Department of Defense. Here I am at the Pentagon. There was that moment where I thought, what am I doing here? Who are all these people? Just, it's the whole sort of defense industry there, people I'd never seen before. But it all started, if I played it back, it started 5 events before where I had done something on a different subject and just kept following forward. And people would ask me to speak at different things, and I would just go, yes, not because I had these great career ambitions, but because I just found it interesting to meet people who were in so many different industries and doing different things, and just they were different.
Well, it's that intellectual curiosity and always wanting to be creative in the advertising. I mean, you're always looking around the corner, aren't you? Yeah, it's what your mother fed you as a baby, too, I think, Shelly.
So David Ogilvy used to always say that the thing he most looked for in people when he hired them was curiosity.
Yes.
Curiosity.
Yes.
Are you curious about things you don't know about in the outside world?
And it's one of the things that we look at in every candidate, in every search, because it's really, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in any industry. And like you said, every board's going to have a problem. So if you don't have that. MaryAnne.
Curiosity is interesting because I think curiosity is also what makes us a bit memorable when we do speak, you know, in a sense that, look, I'm in a very shallow pool. It's pretty lonely in real estate development. It's a dynasty business in New York. And Bruce Ratner really wanted none of it. And so we were siloed in Brooklyn. We were doing great work, but he wouldn't go to a real estate board meeting if his life depended upon it. He wanted nothing to do with his peers. And he gave me a runway. And I would say that I believe the firm needed to be out there because we had a great story. And we bid on the New York Times project. I went to him and I said, Bruce, I want to build this building in Times Square. And he said to me, are you out of your mind? This is going to get built by somebody whose portrait is next to Arthur Sulzberger's in the Met. Like, you're out of your mind. We're in Brooklyn. Like, what are you talking about? And I said, I just think we can win. We just built the entire south side of 42nd Street. We actually know what we're doing. And if it's really going to be done on the merits, we should win. He said to me, you know what? You're young, and I'm going to let you do this because you're going to learn a lesson, and you're going to spend a lot of time and money. And I said, okay, that's great. And then I was like, I definitely have to win now. So we put this bid together, and you know, it really takes a lot of people to do, a lot of really good people to do great buildings. But I would say that there's always one person identified with a project that has like a 7-year life cycle. But this became like a child to me. But in the presentation, which I put together, and again, I didn't know anything, so I just made it up. Like, I remember the Times was obsessed with the schedule for the new building, so I had this giant schedule printed out. I had this intern dress up like a newspaper carrier, run in the room with a giant like scissor and like cut the schedule in half. It was so bad, but I made them laugh. And they went around the room after they interviewed the 5 big developers and us. And I found this out later because I became very close with them. They selected us to build the building, but they said something that was very interesting, which is that the New York Times did a weighted criteria for every individual and every firm. And they said that we were the only firm that actually brought people who, everybody in the room had something to say around the table. And it was infectious, everybody participated, and that there was humor, and there was authenticity, and there was honesty, and there was expertise, and it was this whole package. And I was the ringleader, and so, you know, in the end of the day, that particular deal, when we won it, changed the course of the company, and really is what set me on a path to being CEO. But I was just so focused on the goal and believing that we really could do it. And you can't ever build a building the same way if you build a building with Renzo Piano, you know, with the New York Times in Times Square. So I would say game changer for me as a professional. But I would say it probably said a lot about my DNA. And then anybody in the company who wanted to do anything wanted to be on my team. And then it just became a little bit like that. And so if you go out and you can talk about an HVAC system in my business and you're a woman, people think you walk on water. And it's the most ridiculous thing. But the fact is there's just not a lot of competition. So I'm just an extreme example of when there's a very shallow field of women and you are willing to go out and network. I really don't like networking, but I'll speak and then I'll mentor people. And the fact is it's a very small universe of people, and that pay forward absolutely comes back.
Well, what are the top 5 danger signs?
So to me, they all come under sort of a similar, well, let me do two. So one is factions. Factions are wicked. I mean, you know, sort of where there are groups on the board that take different positions and that they never come to. It's a little like Congress, you know. They never come together, and they tend to represent different interests. Is usually when that happens. So that's got flashing lights all over it because, especially at difficult moments, you need a board to come together. The second danger sign to me is management that doesn't really answer the questions. They posture, they say nice words, but they will get back to you, and they don't. That to me is an even bigger danger sign of you're going to be going down, you know, this path of life with them. You need to know that they're going to share with you the information that they have. Those are the two I would cite.
And maybe we can close with what it really means to be on a board, because I've always said the number one responsibility is to hire, fire, pay the CEO. But that's really, you know, like you said, you had to fire the CEO. And, you know, strategic direction of the company, are we going in the right direction? And then the fiduciary and succession planning. But this is heavy duty stuff. And if I'm a shareholder of a company, I want to make sure that a board has the right board, the composition is right. So it's really serious when you go on a board, and so you have to be prepared. You do need to know good corporate governance, and you do have to have the skills for that board. But there's another pieces of what makes a great board person. So maybe we can just go down the row here and just talk briefly, rapid fire, in terms of your advice of what makes a great board member, that the interpersonal piece as well as being the right
sure.
person for the board.
I will say, in the most effective boards that I've sat on, the most important aspect of it is mutual respect and care. And good boards have people who have different views. And if that's not true, then it's not a good board. But they tend to have people who have strong views, different views. But what makes a board effective is the ability of other directors to listen to the different views, to open their minds, and then to come to a decision. I remember one rather contentious issue that we had on a board that I sat on, and the chairman actually insisted that we go around the room and that everyone at the end give their position. And what struck me as each person spoke was this: they either said it explicitly or they implied it, that here's what I think, but I have enough respect for the other 14 people sitting around the table that if the sense of the board is to go in the other direction, I will support it. And I just thought that is the perfect kind of attitude and approach, is I speak strongly my view, but I respect the others enough that I am comfortable coming to the collective decision and supporting it.
It's true.
That's great. I would say that the difference between management and board members, I think that a good board and a good board member knows about governance and knows what the management of the company is supposed to be doing, what the board's supposed to be doing. And every once in a while you see a board member in a way over-meddling into management. And I think that's a form of dysfunction, because if the CEO is not able to manage the company, the CEO shouldn't be there. But if the board members have a tendency to move into management areas, it's claustrophobic for the CEO, and it's inappropriate because the board is acting in a capacity I think that they ought not to be acting in. So knowing how to stay in their lane, be high performing, but also knowing how to stay in their lane of governance, I think is super important.
So MaryAnne, let me just give, I have a great Ann Taylor moment that stays in my mind. Is one of the days I knew it was really bad and this was not going to work was when some director screamed at the CEO because she didn't have ponchos in the selection of clothing that was available, and for the lack of ponchos, the whole company was going down.
Yes,
and I just thought, this is not the role of a director.
No.
And also, she chose orange when the correct color was pink for
Wow.
that season.
Yeah,
so
see.
there you go.
Yeah, terrible.
Those experiences are priceless. Pam.
I would add that whether you know a lot about the industry when you agree to be on a board, or you learn about it along the way, as you did, Catherine, you've got to develop a passion for it, about the subject matter. You've got to be interested in it. It's yes, you can kind of fake it and do the work, but it's not fun in that regard. Again, in mutual funds, they sound a little dry, but we manage, they manage, we don't manage, but we have oversight over $200 billion of assets that might be in your portfolio. So you want to know that I am going to listen to the portfolio manager presentations. I'm going to know something about what they're talking about. I'm going to ask good questions and push the points, and ask management. Do we have the right strategy? Do we have the right people? Do we have the people in the right seats, or the right people in the seats, and et cetera? So I think an interest level that doesn't get you into the arena of management, but get you enough oversight such that you are asking and you want to ask the good questions.